For over 20 years, Earth had walked a careful line among the stars. It was not a line of strength, but of patience. The Cathari Dominion, a vast alliance of alien species with ships that bent light and weapons that cracked planets, had allowed humanity to join the galactic community, but only as a junior partner. Earth's leaders accepted this. They smiled in meetings. They signed treaties that favored the Cathari. They gave up mining rights on moons they had settled. They did all this quietly, without protest, because they believed peace was worth the cost. Frank Lowell knew that cost better than most. As Earth's senior diplomat to the Cathari conquered, he spent his days in sterile conference rooms aboard orbital stations, listening to condescending speeches from Cathari overseers who barely looked at him. Their eyes, large, black and lidless, always seemed fixed on something beyond him, as if his presence was an inconvenience they tolerated only because their own rules required it. Frank never raised his voice. He never argued. He nodded, took notes, and reported back to Geneva with calm detachment. That was his job, to be the polite face of a species still learning its place. Lisa Grant saw things differently. As Earth's defense liaison, she sat in the same rooms but heard different truths. While Frank focused on words, Lisa watched hands, how Cathari officers tapped their claws when impatient, how their ship commanders shifted posture when lying. She knew the Dominion's promises were thin. She had seen their warships drift too close to human colonies. She had reviewed sensor logs showing unauthorized scans of Earth's orbital defenses. And yet, every time she raised concerns, she was told to avoid provocation. So she stayed quiet, but her eyes never stopped watching. The trouble began near Proxima Centauri. For 15 years, humans had mined the asteroid belts there under a joint agreement. The colony, called Haven 7, was small, just a few thousand people living in pressurized domes and rotating habitats. They sent back rare metals used in Earth's clean energy grids. The Cathari had never shown interest in the region, until now. Without warning, 3 Cathari dreadnoughts appeared at the edge of the system. They powered down all human comms, jammed navigation beacons, and ordered every ship to stand down. When Haven 7's administrator asked for clarification, the Cathari replied with a single transmission. Surrender control. Resistance is inefficient. Frank received the message while eating breakfast in his quarters aboard the Unity Summit Station, a neutral meeting point orbiting Mars. He read it twice, then called Lisa. She arrived within minutes, her uniform crisp, her expression tight. "They're taking Haven 7, Frank said, voice low. "They're testing us," Lisa replied. "If we back down now, they'll hit Luna next. Then Earth orbit." Frank rubbed his temples. "We have protocols. We file a formal objection. We request mediation through the Concord Council." Lisa shook her head. "They control the council. Vractal chairs it." "This isn't diplomacy, Frank. It's theft with paperwork." High Overseer Vractal was the Dominion's most powerful voice in human affairs. Tall, armored in chitinous plates and always flanked by silent enforcers, he spoke in a voice like grinding stone. He had once told Frank during a private dinner that humanity's greatest flaw was its excessive sentimentality. He said humans wasted time on fairness, mercy, and second chances, weaknesses no true power could afford. Now, that belief was becoming action. Within hours, Earth's government convened an emergency session. President Nora Hayes, a former schoolteacher turned wartime leader after the Titan riots, listened as her advisors debated responses. Some urged immediate sanctions. Others suggested sending a peace envoy. Only General Paul Dawson, head of Unified Space Command, spoke plainly. "They want to see if we'll fight," he said. "If we send another note asking nicely, they'll take Mars next." Nora didn't answer right away. She looked out the window of her office at the blue curve of Earth below. Then she turned to Frank and Lisa, who had been summoned via secure link. "Go to the summit," she said. "Meet Vractal face to face. Tell him this is unacceptable, but do it. Carefully." Frank nodded. Lisa said nothing. The meeting took place in Chamber 9, a circular room with walls that shifted color based on emotional resonance, a Cathari invention meant to promote honesty. Frank wore his best suit. Lisa wore her dress uniform, medals gleaming. Vractal entered last, his heavy steps echoing. He didn't sit. He loomed. "You interrupt Dominion operations," he said, voice flat. "We are partners," Frank replied, keeping his tone even. "Partners do not seize each other's colonies without cause." Cause is irrelevant, Fractal said. Efficiency is law. Your colony sits on resources the Dominion now requires. Your presence is redundant. Lisa stepped forward. Redundant? We built that colony with our own hands. We lost people in the ice storms of 38. Your losses are your own, Fractal cut in. Do not confuse shared space with shared power. Frank felt a cold knot form in his stomach. This wasn't negotiation. It was notification. He took a breath. Then let us be clear. If the Cathari proceed with this occupation, Earth will have no choice but to reconsider the terms of our alliance. For the first time, Fractal's eyes fixed fully on him. There was no anger, only amusement. Reconsider? He echoed. You have no fleet worth naming. Your weapons are toys. Your unity is fragile. You speak of terms as if you set them. He leaned closer, his breath smelling of ozone and metal. Earth survives because we allow it. Remember that. The meeting ended there. As Frank and Lisa walked back to their shuttle, neither spoke. The station's corridors felt colder than usual. Outside the viewport, a Cathari patrol ship glided past, its hull scarred from old battles Earth had never been part of. Back on the shuttle, Lisa finally broke the silence. They think we're bluffing. We are, Frank admitted. We have no real deterrent. Not yet, but what if we did? She asked, almost to herself. Frank didn't answer. He stared at the stars, wondering how long Earth could keep pretending to be courteous while its future was stripped away piece by piece. When they returned to Earth, President Hayes met them in person. She listened to their report without interruption. Then she stood, walked to the window, and said something no Earth leader had ever said aloud in front of witnesses. Next time they push us, we won't ask them to stop. We'll tell them. And in that moment, something shifted, not in policy, but in spirit. The age of quiet submission was ending. What came next would not be polite, but it would be human. President Nora Hayes called the emergency session just after midnight Earth time. The room was small, deep beneath Geneva, lined with sound-dampening panels and shielded from every kind of scan. Around the table sat the few people who knew the truth, that Earth was not as defenseless as it seemed. General Paul Dawson arrived last, his boots clicking on the steel floor, his face unreadable. Dr. Elena Ruiz followed, her lab coat still dusted with lunar regolith from her last inspection at the Tycho facility. She carried no files, no tablet, just a small data chip in her palm. Nora didn't waste time on greetings. They've taken Haven 7, she said. Not just occupied it. They executed the administrator for refusing to hand over the core logs. Broadcast it live to every human outpost. A silence settled over the room. Paul's jaw tightened. Elena closed her eyes for a second, then opened them. They're trying to break us, Paul said. Not with ships. With fear. And they think it'll work, Elena added softly. Because we've never shown them anything else. Nora looked at each of them. We have one chance to respond before they move on Mars. What do we do? Paul leaned forward. We hit back, hard. We've got the Viper-class destroyers ready in the belt. We cloak in, take out their comms relay near Proxima, cut their command chain. And then what? Nora asked. They send 10 more ships. We lose 10 more colonies. Elena placed the chip on the table. Or we show them we've been lying. All eyes turned to her. She didn't smile. She never did when speaking of Project Veil. For 15 years, she began, we've studied every piece of alien tech we could recover. Wreckage from the Titan skirmish, derelict probes, even scrap traded on black markets. We couldn't match their power sources at first. But we found something better. We learned how to disrupt them. She tapped the chip. This contains the activation codes for the Echo Array. 300 microsatellites hidden in asteroid clusters across the Sol system. Once deployed, they emit phased gravity pulses that confuse Cathari navigation. Their ships rely on quantum lock guidance. Ours don't. We built ours the old way. Gyros, star maps, human pilots. Paul nodded slowly. And the fleet. Not the old fleet, Elena said. The real one. 12 ships. Silent hulls. No emissions. Weapons based on resonance fields. Not lasers, not missiles. They don't explode. They unravel. Nora sat very still. You're saying we've had a secret navy this whole time? Not a navy, Elena corrected. A deterrent. Built in hidden docks on the far side of Luna. Funded through black budgets disguised as deep space research. Every captain, every engineer, they've trained in silence. They've never fired a shot in anger. But they're ready. Nora looked at Frank and Lisa, who had been watching from the back. What does diplomacy say now? Frank spoke quietly. Diplomacy says we give them one last warning. Not a plea. A statement clear, final. Lisa added. If we attack without warning, we become what they say we are, savages. But if we warn them and they ignore us, the galaxy will understand. Nora thought for a long time. Outside, rain began to fall on Geneva, soft and steady. Inside, the air hummed with tension. Then we warn them, she said at last. But not in their language of veiled threats and polite lies. We speak plainly, humanly, she turned to Frank. Draft it, short, no jargon. No room for misunderstanding, Frank nodded. He stepped to a terminal and typed just one sentence, then read it aloud. Stop attack or we stop pretending to be courteous. The room went quiet again. Paul let out a low whistle. Elena almost smiled. That's it? Lisa asked. That's everything, Frank replied. It says we've been holding back. It says we won't anymore, and it leaves the choice with them. Nora approved it without change. Within the hour, the message was encoded, encrypted, and sent directly to Vractal's command vessel via a tight beam laser. No relay, no delay. It bypassed all diplomatic channels. This was not a request for discussion. It was a line in the void. Back on the Unity Summit station, Vractal received the message during his mid-cycle meditation. His aide hesitated before handing him the data slate. Vractal read it once, then again. Then he laughed, a dry, clicking sound like stones breaking. Courteous, he said to no one in particular. They think manners are a strategy. He ordered the message archived under human delusions and gave new commands. Expand the blockade to include the Sirius mining outposts, prepare orbital insertion teams for Mars's northern bases, and increase surveillance on Earth shipyards. He did not believe Earth had anything to threaten with. After all, in 20 years of watching, they had never once raised a fist. Only hands open in greeting or empty in surrender. What Vractal did not know was that while he laughed deep in the shadow of the moon, 12 dark shapes powered up their cores. Their crews, men and women with call signs like Rook, Wren, and Hatch, ran final diagnostics. No music played. No speeches were made. They simply checked their systems, locked their harnesses, and waited. Elena stood in the Tycho control bunker, watching the feed from the lead ship, the UNS Dauntless. Its captain, a quiet woman named Carol Briggs, gave a single thumbs up through the camera. Elena returned it. Paul stood on the command deck in Geneva, staring at a star map that showed Cathari positions as red dots. Soon those dots would flicker, then vanish. Frank and Lisa were back aboard their shuttle en route to a safe station near Ceres. They had done their part. Now the silence would speak. Nora Hayes walked alone to the surface after the rain stopped. She looked up at the night sky, where no stars were visible through the clouds, and whispered something only she could hear. Down in the bunker, Elena activated the first phase of Project Veil. A single command, one word, unfold. Across the solar system, dormant satellites stirred. Hidden shipyards opened their doors, and Earth, for the first time in decades, stopped apologizing for existing. The Cathari would learn soon enough that courtesy was not weakness. It was restraint, and restraint, once released, became something far more dangerous. But for now, there was only waiting, and the quiet hum of engines that had never been heard before. The Cathari did not wait long. Within 6 hours of receiving Earth's message, their response came, not in words but in fire. 3 human outposts near the Sirius belt vanished from the network. No distress calls. No survivors. Just static where voices used to be. The Dominion broadcast a short clip across all public channels. A Cathari warship hovering over a shattered habitat ring, its hull peeling open like a crushed can. A voice, Vractal, spoke over the image. Humanity mistakes noise for strength. Silence is the true measure of power. On Earth, cities fell quiet. People gathered in squares and homes and underground shelters, watching the same feed over and over. Some cried. Some shouted. Most just stared, numb. The message was clear. Earth's warning had been laughed at. And now, the punishment had begun. Frank and Lisa were aboard their shuttle near the Ceres relay when the first attack hit. Alarms blared as comms channels filled with emergency codes. Lisa tried to raise Geneva, but the line was dead. Then Mars Command. Then Luna, nothing. Only bursts of broken audio, screams, orders, then silence. "They're cutting us off," Lisa said, her hands flying over the console. "Jamming everything." Frank watched the main screen. Red markers blinked out one by one. Avon 9 Sirius Prime. Even the old research station on Titan, gone. His throat felt tight. He had spent his life believing words could prevent this. Now words had failed. "They think we'll beg," he said quietly. Lisa looked at him. "Maybe we should have lied better." Back on Earth, President Nora Hayes stood in the war room, her face pale but steady. Reports poured in from every sector. Casualty estimates climbed. Orbital defenses were on full alert, but they were old, designed to stop pirates, not dreadnoughts. General Paul Dawson stood beside her, arms crossed, eyes locked on the star map. "They're testing our nerve," he said, "seeing if we'll fold." Nora didn't answer right away. She thought of the school she used to teach at, now empty because parents kept children home. She thought of her brother, who worked on the Mars hydroponics grid. Was he still alive? She didn't know. No one did. "Activate Phase Omega," she said. Paul didn't hesitate. He tapped his comm. "All units, execute." Far beyond Mars, hidden in the dust clouds of the asteroid belt, the UNS Dauntless powered up its main drive. No flames, no bright exhaust, just a soft blue shimmer as its quantum core stabilized. Captain Carol Briggs gave the order. "Set course for Proxima. Full stealth." Across the system, 11 other ships did the same. They moved like ghosts, their hulls absorbing radar, their engines tuned to frequencies below detection. To the Cathari sensors, they were empty space. Dr. Elena Ruiz watched from the Tycho bunker as the Echo Array came online. Tiny satellites no bigger than a suitcase unfolded their gravity lenses and began pulsing. The effect was subtle at first, a slight wobble in Cathari navigation readings, a flicker in their targeting systems. But it was enough. Their ships, built for precision, suddenly found their coordinates drifting. Commands took longer to reach their fleets. Gaps opened in their formation. The Cathari didn't notice at first. They were too busy celebrating. Fractal held a victory briefing aboard his flagship, the Iron Maw. He stood before a hologram of Earth, pointing to key orbital points. "Within 48 hours, he declared, we will control all human supply lines. Their cities will beg for mercy. Their leaders will kneel." His officers clicked their mandibles in approval. None of them saw the dark shape sliding into position behind their rear guard. Frank and Lisa finally got a signal through. A narrow band burst from Luna. It was encrypted, but Lisa cracked it fast. Her eyes widened. "It's happening," she said. "They're moving." Frank leaned over. The message was short. "Veil is lifted. Stand by." He didn't understand the code name, but he saw the change in Lisa's face. Hope. Not the soft kind. The hard kind. The kind that comes just before a storm. On the Dauntless, Carol Briggs gave the final order. "Weapons hot. Target the comms hub on the Iron Maw. Disable, don't destroy. We want them to know who did this." The first shot wasn't a beam or a missile. It was a pulse, silent, invisible. It struck the Iron Maw's main antenna array and unraveled its molecular bonds. Metal turned to dust in seconds. The ship didn't explode, it just fell apart at the seams. Alarms blared across the Cathari fleet. Fractal spun around, his comm shattered. What was that? No one answered, because at that moment 11 more pulses hit 11 more ships. Command vessels went dark. Escorts spun out of control. The blockade, once a wall of steel and arrogance, began to crumble. Back on Earth, Paul watched the feed from the Dauntless with grim satisfaction. They thought we were slow. They thought we were blind. Nora stood beside him. Now they'll think we're something else. In the Ceres shuttle, Lisa whispered, "They never stopped building. They just stopped showing." Frank finally understood. All those years of silence, of yielding, of being courteous, it wasn't fear. It was cover. While the Cathari mocked Earth's weakness, humans had been preparing in the dark. Not for war, for justice. The first battle lasted less than an hour. By the time the Cathari realized they were under attack, half their fleet was disabled. No human lives were lost in the strike. No cities burned. Earth had struck not with rage, but with precision. And as the Cathari ships drifted powerless in the void, a new message was sent. Not from Geneva, not from a diplomat, but from the Dauntless itself. It was simple, just 2 lines. You mistook restraint for fear. We were simply being polite. Fractal received it on a backup console. He read it once. Then he smashed the screen with his claw, but it was too late. The lie was over. And Earth at last was speaking plainly. The silence after the first strike was heavier than any explosion. Across the Proxima system, Cathari ships floated like dead fish, their lights flickering, their weapons cold. No one fired back because no one knew where the attack had come from. Their sensors showed empty space. Their comms were scrambled by the echo array's pulses, turning every signal into noise. Panic spread through their ranks, not the loud kind, but the quiet, chilling kind that comes when you realize your enemy understands you better than you understand yourself. Aboard the UNS Dauntless, Captain Carol Briggs didn't celebrate. She watched the enemy fleet drift and gave her next order calmly. Move to Grid 7, target their fuel depots, disable, not destroy. She knew Earth's goal wasn't to kill, it was to show. To prove that humanity could strike with control, with purpose, with something the Cathari had never credited them with: discipline. General Paul Dawson coordinated from Earth orbit, his voice steady as he guided the hidden fleet through the chaos. 12 ships, small, fast, and unseen, danced between the Cathari giants like shadows between trees. They hit relay stations, power cores, and command hubs, always avoiding crew quarters, always leaving escape pods intact. It was war, but it was also a message. We are not like you. Dr. Elena Ruiz monitored everything from the Tycho bunker. Her fingers flew across holographic displays, adjusting the echo array's frequency to match the Cathari's attempts to recalibrate. Every time they tried to reboot their navigation, she shifted the gravity pulses just enough to throw them off again. It wasn't brute force, it was chess. And for the first time, humans were playing as equals. On the Unity Summit Station, now abandoned by Cathari personnel, Frank and Lisa watched the battle unfold through a smuggled data feed Lisa had patched together. They saw the Dauntless glide past a crippled dreadnought, its hull smooth and dark, reflecting starlight like a knife. Lisa let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. They're not just fighting, she said. They're teaching, Frank nodded. Teaching them that courtesy has a cost, and we've paid it long enough. Back on Earth, people began to hear rumors. Not through official channels, those were still jammed, but through old networks, ham radios, even encrypted social threads. Word spread that the Cathari were retreating, that human ships, real ones, strong ones, were pushing them back. In cities, in farms, in underground labs, people stood a little taller. Hope wasn't a feeling anymore. It was a fact. Fractal refused to believe it. From the bridge of the Iron Maw, now half dark, its main systems offline, he barked orders to regroup, to counterattack, to find the source of the pulses, but his fleet was scattered. His commanders were confused. And worse, some of his allied species, lesser races the Cathari had forced into service, began powering down their weapons. They had watched Earth strike with precision, not cruelty. They saw no slaughter, only strategy. And for the first time, they wondered if the Dominion had been lying to them, too. Paul saw the shift on his screens. Some of their ships are standing down, he told Nora. They're not fighting back. Nora didn't smile. Good, we don't want more enemies. We want fewer lies. The final move came not from a weapon, but from a voice. Carol Briggs opened a wide band channel, one that cut through the jamming like a clean blade. Her voice, calm and clear, echoed across every Cathari ship, every human outpost, every listening ear in the system. You called us children, she said. You said we played with fire we couldn't control. But fire isn't just destruction. It's light. It's warmth. It's the thing that lets us see in the dark. She paused. Then, we've been in your shadow long enough. Now you'll see us. At that moment, the Dauntless and its sister ships powered up their external lights. Not weapons, just bright white beams that cut through the void. For the first time, the Cathari saw their attackers. Not monsters, not machines. Human ships marked with Earth's blue and white insignia, flying in perfect formation. Fractal stared at the screen. His pride cracked like old ice. He ordered a retreat, but it was too late. His authority was already crumbling. Paul gave the order to hold position. No pursuit, no chase. Let them run. Let them tell the galaxy what they'd seen. In the Ceres shuttle, Lisa turned to Frank. What happens now? Frank looked out at the stars. Now they learned to listen. On Earth, Nora Hayes stepped onto the balcony of the Emergency Command Center. The sun was rising over the Alps. She took a deep breath. The air smelled like rain and soil, real human things. Not metal, not fear. Down in the bunker, Elena shut down the echo array. The satellites went quiet, folding back into sleep. The job was done. And in the void between stars, 12 ships turned toward home, not in triumph, but in readiness. Because they knew the fight wasn't over. But the lie was, Earth would never again be spoken to as if it didn't matter. And from that day on, when humans said stop, the galaxy would stop. Not because they begged, but because they meant it. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy changed. Not with a bang, but with whispers. The Cathari Dominion, once seen as unshakable, began to crack from within. Species that had served under its rule for generations, silent, obedient, afraid, started asking questions. They had watched Earth strike not with rage, but with restraint. They had seen human ships disable, not destroy, and they remembered how the Cathari had treated them, as tools, not partners. Now embassies from 3 former client worlds reached out to Earth, not to threaten, to talk. President Nora Hayes met them not in a war room, but in a garden on the edge of Geneva. There were no guards, no weapons in sight. Just chairs, tea, and open sky. She spoke plainly, as she always did. "We don't want your loyalty," she told the envoys. "We want your honesty, and your word that you'll deal with us as equals." They agreed. Not because Earth had the biggest fleet, but because Earth had shown it could be trusted. Frank Lowell returned to diplomacy, but not as before. He no longer wore the mask of polite submission. When he sat across from alien representatives, he spoke with quiet firmness. He listened, but he also set boundaries. And when one minor faction tried to demand mining rights on Mars, Frank simply said, "We share what we choose to share, not what you take." The envoy blinked, then nodded. The message was clear. Earth's courtesy was now a choice, not a weakness. Lisa Grant took a new role, liaison to the newly formed Sol Defense Pact, a coalition of human colonies and allied species. She worked with engineers from the Veln, a bird-like race once forced to build Cathari engines to upgrade Earth's orbital grids. They shared designs. They traded knowledge. It wasn't charity. It was partnership. And for the first time, humans stood shoulder to shoulder with others not below them. General Paul Dawson oversaw the transition from war footing to watchful peace. The 12 Vale-class ships remained active, but they no longer hid. They patrolled the edges of human space, visible, ready, but never aggressive. Their presence alone was enough to keep raiders and old Cathari loyalists at bay. Paul often visited the Dauntless, now docked at Luna Station, for maintenance. He'd stand on the observation deck with Captain Carol Briggs and watch Earth rise over the moon's gray horizon. "You changed everything," he once said to her. She shook her head. "We just stopped pretending." Dr. Elena Ruiz turned her focus outward. She opened Project Vale's archives, not all of it, but enough to trusted allies. The Echo Array design was shared with the Veln, who adapted it to protect their own homeworld. Human scientists worked alongside alien researchers to refine resonance weapons into tools for asteroid deflection and deep space construction. Technology once built for war became a bridge. Back on Earth, life slowly returned to normal, but not the old normal. Children in schools learned not just about history, but about dignity. News reports spoke of cooperation, not conquest. And when the first joint human Veln freighter launched toward the Sirius Belt, thousands gathered to watch it climb into the sky. No one cheered. They just stood together, quiet and proud. The Cathari did not vanish. Ractal was removed from command by his own council, replaced by a more cautious leader who sent a formal message to Earth. "We seek dialogue." Nora Hayes replied with one sentence, "Then speak as equals, or not at all." There was no anger in her words, only truth. Frank and Lisa stood side by side on the roof of the new Interstellar Relations building in Nairobi, watching a sunset paint the clouds gold and purple. They didn't speak for a long time. "Do you think they'll ever understand?" Lisa finally asked. "Maybe not," Frank said, "but they'll respect it. That's enough." Below them, the city hummed with life, markets, music, the sound of people building a future without fear. In orbit, the Dauntless powered up for a routine patrol. On Luna, Elena tested a new satellite that could clean space debris using the same pulses once used in battle. And in Geneva, Nora Hayes signed a treaty with 3 new allies, her pen steady, her heart calm. Earth had not become an empire. It had become itself, flawed, hopeful, and finally free to stand without apology. The age of pretending was over. Humanity no longer needed to prove it belonged among the stars. It simply did. And when new ships from distant systems arrived at the edge of soul space, they did not find a weak, begging world. They found a planet that listened, that shared, that defended its own, and treated others with the same fairness it demanded for itself. That was Earth's new language. Not threats, not silence, but clear, honest words backed by the courage to live by them. And in the quiet between the stars, that was enough.